Director Rudora,
Here.
Vice President Singamon.
Posting of the agenda.
The agenda for today's special board meeting workshop was posted on Friday, February 28th, 2020.
And any conflict of interest? Got any of the numbers there? Do we still need to read number 6 down, even though this is workshop? Okay. This portion of the meeting is reserved for the persons desiring to address the board on any matter not on the
Chuck,
agenda.
your microphone, please.
I'm here. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the board on any matter not on the agenda over which the board has jurisdiction. Okay? However, no action may be taken by the board of directors on any item not occurring on the agenda. Non-agenda speakers are asked to limit their presentation to 5 minutes. Public questions and comments on items listed on the agenda will be accepted at any time the item is brought forth for consideration by the board. When you are recognized by the chairperson, please state your name and address for the record, and please make sure you talk into the microphone. Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to have a presentation by Chuck Krieger, the historical consideration of ultimate water sources. Chuck?
Yes. You're up.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. The idea for this, I think this workshop came about after a previous board meeting when Director Kaczynski had made comments about some exploratory work within the valley. And it became clear that, we'd done some stuff in the past that Director Kaczynski wasn't familiar with, and it occurred to us, and perhaps we could have a general discussion about the historic activities of the district, looking for supplemental sources of water, so we can have better understanding of the efforts that have come before today. I was looking at and through our files over the past few days, and I would find letters from 1986 from the president of the board to the LA Department of Water and Power requesting negotiations and discussions of an arrangement for exchange or for wheeling. And like coming back with a kind of a vague, yeah, sure, we could do that, and let us know. And so through the years, you would see the different energies and exchanges with LADWP. But we have over the years studied a lot of sources, a lot of cost estimates, and prepared a lot of cost estimates for various ideas. So brought by various directors. So I put some summaries together on some of these efforts, and so I was really just planning on kind of doing a brief overview of each of the things, and if anybody has any questions, of course, feel free to ask. The first one I have up here is galleries, and this is something that has been discussed frequently, Dr. Pierre Saint-Amand. And it's essentially going to the 5 canyons, 5 mile, 9 mile sand, Grapevine and Indian Wells canyons, and capturing that water prior to its coming down the hill into the dry lake. So it was capturing it before it came down, trying to preserve the high quality water and bring it into town. We were looking here, this is everything that went into it, so it's a shallow perforated pipe. It's like a horizontal well that you don't have to dig too deep if you go far enough up into the canyon, and you capture water as it's flowing in the alluvium. This includes pipelines that bring it down into the district system. And at that time, back then in 2005 dollars, I thought it was going to be a little bit higher than that. I think we were looking at, back when we started doing this kind of stuff in the early 90s, I think we were looking at about 75 to 85 bucks an acre foot for the district to operate a well, and that is amortized capital cost and O&M costs. So we're looking for a long time at less than $100 an acre foot. So anytime that you came in with $1,000 an acre foot, that's 10 times higher than what was being paid. And that's not even considering some of the other challenges that would result from some of these projects. And in fact, as you guys might have guessed, one of the biggest challenges with the galleries is the water rights. Water rights, as far as the state is concerned with assigning them, because they're not assigned, and also adverse impacts on the pumpers downstream from those canyons that depend on that recharge for their uses. So galleries were investigated. In general, it was like that environmental and legal challenge would be enormous. And so that was something we said, okay, well, we looked at it, but now we're not gonna spend more energy on that because it didn't appear viable at the time. Late in the 90s, we were looking at blending because, of course, we had the Southwest well field, and we knew that was high quality water. We had done the test in 1988. The Southwest well 18 was constructed in 1988. And we tested it, and it was a prolific aquifer with high quality water. And the idea was, wow, we have this Northwest well field where the water is brackish. The quality is not very good. And so what would it take for us to have pipelines or pumping plants from each to a reservoir to mix it and then boost it into the system? And so that's what constitutes that project. And we looked at 500 parts per million as kind of the target, and we figured in order to get that, you're looking at, $1,200 an acre foot in 1999. That's more than 10 times what you're paying for it coming out of the well. Out of the potable water. And it uses very little of the brackish water because they're so salty that you have to use a lot of good quality water to bring it down. The Southwest wellfield used to be about 320 parts per million. Is that what it is about now?
It still is.
Right about that. Mm-hmm. So it can only reduce it so much when you have the high concentration of brackish. And you can see on the second line up there, even if you bump it up to 720, so you're serving water that's still legal but not very appetizing. It's still quite a bit of money. So the blending idea was, and by the way, now that the plan is in place, all of these things are of course going to be affected by the plan's targets. Some of them are that's off the table automatically. We looked at groundwater treatment, brackish water treatment, and this was back in 2010. Gosh, I thought it was longer ago than that, but the district hired Carollo engineers to perform an actual pilot study. Don, I think you were on the board then maybe, and take a look, what's it really got to do? And you might have reviewed this as part of your brackish water resource study that's been going on.
It was before that, Chuck. That was like the final report.
That was the final report, that's right, okay. Yeah, you're right, 06, I think. That
Yeah,
we didn't have the results of the pilot study until 2010. And so you can see there that it was a lot of money. It's, $2,300 an acre foot in 2010. That's a ton. But part of the challenge there was it was zero liquid discharge. So if you're on the coast and you're desalinating water, you get 70% of the minerals, of the water that you're putting in. You have 30% as brine. You can just discharge it to, the ocean. You can't do that out here. There's no place to put the brine except where we would want to put it back out on the playa, but that's against the ideas of the state to allow us to do that. Because if you look, it reduces it by $1,200 an acre foot, $800 an acre foot, if you don't have to do that zero liquid discharge. And that proved to be a big challenge for the identified treatment technology at that time, which I suspect would be the same that we're talking about now. So 30% of the water coming out of the 100 units delivered, 30 units coming out, have got high levels of salt in them. What can we do with them? Are there any questions about the galleries or about treatment or blending?
I prefer to hold mine for the end. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
You're complete.
Microphone.
Oh, boy.
You have to check.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Okay.
You gotta stay with there. I'll stay.
Yeah,
Gotta keep that 6-foot separation.
It's not even close, look at
Okay.
That's only 5.
Just for your clarification, this is Judy Decker, and I was on the board, you mentioned 1986. That's when I first got on the board. The idea of blending the water from the southwest with the water from the northwest. The water from the northwest was the water from Neil Ranch, which was from the time the district bought it to the time we discussed doing this, the water quality deteriorated considerably. So you need to keep that in the back of your mind.
My color commentator. Thank you, Judy. All this time, by the way, continuous discussions with LA are going on. In '92, we had meetings, and the board was focused on really keeping contact with LADWP, which we did our best for. Ultimately, we didn't succeed in what our target was, but the efforts were there. Okay, so here's an example of others that were looked at. The Indian Wells Grapevine Canyon, that project, which was precipitated by a property owner up there that wanted to sell property to the district, and the district saying, hey, if we buy that property, can we put some wells in? Can we bring the water down into town? So it's kind of a micro version, or a smaller version of the galleries idea. And again, it turned out to be an expensive proposition. And likely, and I didn't mention this for the galleries, but the state would view that as water under the influence of surface water. So you'd have to treat that water before consumption. You could always recharge it if you wanted to, but if we're going to take it directly out of a gallery or out of a well that's in proximity to a stream water source, typically it's determined to be surface water, which requires filtration and treatment. So, and again, the water rights issue is just as prevalent there as what I mentioned for the galleries. You have the permits that you have to get from the state, but then you also have to consider the downstream effects. I put the Onyx Ranch on here. That was something that's been discussed. Rosedale Rio Bravo Water District, I think, is about to put out an environmental impact report on that, and they had talked about partnering with East Side Sierra users, I guess, or East Side Kern County users, I should say. And I'm not sure what the status of that is, but I know that's one thing that has been brought up periodically.
It's over.
It's over? Okay.
Yeah, the draft EIR is about to come out on Onyx Ranch, and I'm sure it'll be critiqued some.
Maybe you're a little cynical, Larry, I don't know. Okay, and then the next one is, acquisition of existing inland in-valley farming operations. That's been a topic of discussion for as long as I can remember. I know that, trying to take a look at what kind of costs would be involved in that. I think we basically can refer back to the Carollo study if we're pumping that water and treating it and bringing it into town. It's a lot of money. One other thing I failed to mention, guys. No, I didn't fail to mention that. I did mention about disposal of the brine on the playa, but the Navy did mention, it has always mentioned whenever we have open water issues like recharge ponds out of Southwest Well Field, weird enunciation, well field, are birds, because the standing water attracts birds, and that they feel can threaten some of their flights. I'm sure that's the case. So that's always been a position of the Navy where we keep thinking, hey, there's this place out there we can put water and it's not going to hurt anybody. But that's been a concern. Okay, so along with the in-valley sources that we've evaluated, and I can't think of any that we haven't talked about now except for water reclamation, but that's always been kind of held up by the chub in the water. I believe that's still the case, but I understand too that they're going to do some more investigation as part of the sustainability plan, which is a very typical thing for most water agencies that we work with in the high and the low deserts. Of course, they're taking that sewage and reclaiming it and then offsetting the potable use with using that on green belts and other things. So hopefully that's something that will come to fruition for the district. But throughout, last few decades, the district has been interested in looking at possible sources and has been approached by a lot of these folks as coming down and say, hey, we have a lot of water. We think that we'd like to sell it to you guys. Of course, I've got the attention of the various boards over the years. And so there's been some investigation and in fact acquisition of the Boy Scouts of America. I just wanted to list a few of these because they were investigated. Costs for the property and certainty of the water played a big part in being hesitant about whether to move forward with some of these things. And of course, there's always the LADWP aqueduct, which would be needed for any of these kind of sources to the north that convey it down to the Indian Wells Valley. And again, we're still talking to LA. That relationship we thought really blossomed in 2009. We've been going down and meeting with them and discussing the kind of projects that we would like to see if we could accomplish. And what the DWP guy at the time, a guy named Jerry Gateway, kept saying, he says, what's in it for us? What's in it for us? If we do it for you, we'd be doing it for Fremont, and we'd be doing it for all these other valleys as we go down adjacent to the LA aqueduct. And we were trying to think, well, what could we do for them? We started to get this idea of having a local banking program for LA. And I think I told you guys before, we did a siting study or an engineering and geological study about where would be a great place to put, or the best place to put a banking program here in the Indian Wells Valley. And we were talking to them about the El Paso Basin, as I think you guys are familiar with that project. And we started talking to LA about the El Paso Basin, and they started getting kind of enthusiastic. And in response to that, they prepared an RFP for a conjunctive use program, because they couldn't just say, hey, Indian Wells, we're going to do you. They had to demonstrate to their board that they'd gone through and done their due diligence in identifying the best project of this type. So the district received the RFP, submitted a proposal in 2009, I think it was. Yeah, 2009. And they received 5 total, I think. But the district was selected. And I remember the enthusiasm that we had. Tom Mulvihill was the general manager at the time, and we worked hard on this, and we were very enthusiastic about that. So then our LADWP increased, and we started putting together some MOUs for doing some exploratory work up in the El Paso, including some drilling and some percolation to see how it would work, and it was all coming to at least the preliminary engineering and geology work. And LA pulled the trigger in 2011, prior to any agreement being executed. And so it was a setback. They decided they weren't sure what they were going to do. It wasn't like it's done forever, but it was done then. And I think, Don, you've had some discussions with LA, and pretty recently. I don't know what they're.
Well, Tom Mulvihill and I went down in April of 2012 when I came on board for a preliminary meeting, just to more or less introduce me to the people at the IWV. And then you and I had a follow-up meeting, I think it was in 2013 or maybe 14. We went down and spoke to David Pettijohn down at IWV, and nothing's really changed. I mean, I do seem to still have some interest. And more recently, since the Sigma, LADWP engaged with, who's our auditor, not Stinson, no. Okay. Not our auditor, our financial. Anyway. It's down in Pasadena. Their office is in Pasadena. We met, and Tim Parker was there too. Remember who?
Yeah.
What's the guy?
Oh,
Dad, is that you?
Tim.
Microphone, Tim.
Well, I don't really have anything to
I'm
add
trying to
to
remember.
that.
Anyway, we met in Pasadena right after the Aqua meeting, I think in 2018.
And it was only BWP's consultant we met.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Consultant, and they were again looking at doing a banking project somewhere along the Eastern Sierra.
And it was Stantec,
Stantec, yes. Yeah, all right, thank you.
formerly MWH, that's why I was confused.
So, yeah, we met with them. It was a meeting that was put together by Stantec. They had a representative, a project manager from IWV there. And again, they were looking for potential banking areas along Eastern Sierra. And at that time, they had narrowed it down to Antelope Valley and Indian Wells Valley. Again, for some, well, I think it's more for political reasons than anything else. You know, they haven't pursued it. They said when we went down for a meeting with them, Capital Corps and myself and representatives from Stetson met with them subsequent to that, and they indicated they still have interest in the banking project, but the main hurdle, if you will, the main obstacle is, of course, getting Inyo County on board. And the takeaway from that meeting was any project, if it's to go forward, has to be a win for Inyo County, a win for IWV, and a win for the Groundwater Authority. So coming up with something that's a win for all three of those is a challenge. So, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any more momentum since that meeting. It's still basically what kind of project can be put together that would benefit all three of those entities. So, but at that meeting, they did continue to say that they do have interest in banking, a banking project in wet years. We've had a couple of those in the last few years that the Sierra received a lot of precipitation. They had to actually really, as those in the valley here know, a couple of years ago, they actually released water into the valley here just because of concerns with flooding upstream. So they're looking for opportunities to take advantage of that water, not just release it, but to bank it and put it to use. I think it's still, from their perspective, something that they are interested in, but I said we're at a point where we find out what would be beneficial project for everybody.
Maybe also looking at it a little differently, and that is it's a do no harm versus benefit. Because I think that's really the concern, is that there's some harm with that Inyo County might get harmed in it. Maybe another way to spin that is, well, what if we can come up with something that does no harm? So there's a way to build an agreement that there is no harm to anybody in that. So, anyway.
We can't hear you, Tim.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Don't
How's
talk
that?
outside.
Well, I think that throughout the investigations for the various ones that are listed up there, which are just a few of them, in fact, Boy Scout Ranch, and it is, everybody knows where that is in Olancha. Borlays was a piece of property that is behind the, what's the place that serves the chili size there in Olancha? Cabin, what's it called? The little,
Restaurant?
it's a restaurant, the Ranch House, thank you.
They're
Yeah,
closed up.
They're closed now, yeah.
I heard that, yeah. So anyway, there's a big piece of property behind them that had the Olancha Creek that came through it. So there's some water. Portuguese Bench, you guys might know, as you're going up through Rose Valley, it's on your left-hand side. It's kind of this green spot, looks like there's a spring. Avocet, or also called the Stratcore Mine, which was a tungsten mine that Judy and I were talking about earlier, that had a lot of water. And Fort Independence Indians, who approached the district about selling their water rights. And of course, always when discussing that, Inyo County concerns would come up. They made it clear. We didn't need to infer anything. Inyo County made it clear that they did like the idea of exporting any water. And so that consideration has been there. The idea, I think, behind the ranch was that it was an ongoing ranching operation. It's a going concern, still is. So it's kind of status quo for the hay ranch right now, and it would seem to me that that might fall under the no damage category, Tim, because following farmland, you're not developing a new water source and not affecting your neighbors as a result.
And just with regard to Butterworth Ranch and operations for the board's benefit, the pumping has varied over the years, but the average has been about 1,200 acre feet.
Yeah, 1,200 acre feet of pumping. I think we've considered it probably be 8,000 acre feet. Excuse me, 800 acre feet usable because of the return flow after you apply it. So, nonetheless, so you'll see the number here is $800 to $1,100 an acre foot, and then thankfully Dawn identified to show you what the basis of those costs were. Don't need to go over that for sure, but that's basically, you know, purchasing or the land or securing water, wheeling it down and having it come down into the district.
Chuck,
Yeah,
can I say something?
do you want me to, do you want to prime me and I'll say it, or do you want to go ahead?
No.
Okay.
I have a couple things. I'll put my hand up here so my germs don't go over there. The Butterworth Ranch, when we first looked at that as a board, we discussed, because it is right next door, putting it in the highway reservoir and taking it out down here. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And we found out that was not possible. I offer this little story to you to think about just as alternatives. At the time when we were up there, I recall our one board member, Rick Cochran, saying, let's just build an aqueduct from here to the Indian Wells Valley. We poo-pooed it as being too expensive at the time. Had we done it, it would be almost paid for by now. Another thing that came up with dealing with Inyo County was, at the time, it didn't really come in the forefront, but it was in the background. At the time, the Atlanta and Cartago area were having water problems because they had a collapsing, very old water infrastructure. Had the water district looked at, and they were offered it and declined taking it over, we would have had influence there. So perhaps in looking at this very sticky political issue of getting water outside of this valley, you need to look at things that don't seem relevant at the time. You really need to think about them. I can see how, as a board, we should have done things differently. But as the late Don Joe McKernan always said, hindsight is 20/20.
Okay. So, moving on from the idea of purchasing East Side Sierra and conveying it. By the way, these numbers include all costs, from generating the water in up there to putting in the aqueduct, bringing it down, conveyance from the aqueduct down into the bottom of the valley here. The next one is a state water project allocation, a table A allocation. It's a very expensive endeavor, and it has reliability issues. As I think everybody knows, they can serve you 70% of your entitlement one year and 10% the next. It has everybody on pins and needles. But this would be, in fact, could you go ahead and go to, I don't know who has this. Is that you, Jason? Thank you so much. So if you go to the first one of the exhibit that looks like a little schematic. So my secretary told me the other day that those don't look very much like the Sierras, but I don't think they're all that bad. But we wanted to put this together as a illustrative tool for how things would work if we were doing exchanges or anything with both sides of the mountains. This one simply shows, up there you buy the property, you produce the water, and you bring it down and put it into the Indian Wells Valley. So that's what that first little east side production exhibit talks about. The next one, thank you, sir. This is what we're talking about here, is actually purchasing the State Water Project Table A allocation from back then, some of the farmers who were going bankrupt, or some of the water districts that had a lot of State Water Project entitlements that were being put to use. One of the almond places, Jim, I don't remember if you remember the name of maybe Blackwell or something like that, but there were Beretta Mesa, there were all kinds of water districts that at that time were looking to sell some of their Table A entitlements. So you buy the allocation, you come down and you have to pay, of course, a variable. Now when you get the entitlement, that comes with an annual payment, whether you get the water or not. And that is a very expensive. I don't even know what they're selling it for now. Jim, what's the latest on buying the Table A entitlement?
Depending upon who you talk to, right now estimates could be 2,000 higher for sure.
Okay. I know
If you can find somebody that's willing to sell.
Yeah, it's a totally different scene now because people have been purchasing these allotments. So yeah, you have to buy the entitlement. It comes down the aqueduct. What happens is you have to pay for it all the way to where Metropolitan would take it out. Back then, keep walking around with this. I need one of those lapel mics. Back then, if you wanted to get water in exchange with LADWP and use State Water Project to do it, you had to go through the Metropolitan Water District because LADWP is not a member of the State Water Project. It's State Water Project Met, and then Met sells water to LADWP. So there wasn't a direct connection. Now LADWP has a direct connection with AVEC. And AVEC is a State Water Project member, and they would facilitate probably an exchange with LA and not Met, but we haven't explored that all that much now. So anyway, you'd have your water coming down that you purchased that would ultimately go into Los Angeles, and then you'd exchange it for water that would be delivered from LA to the Indian Wells Valley, not purchased from a property, but just exchanged with Los Angeles. Now the numbers that we see here, it's important to remember, those aren't adjusted for water quality. The water quality in State Water Project is not nearly as good as it is in the LA aqueduct. In fact, I think in the LA aqueduct, I measured it years ago, it was like 85 parts per million. And what's State Water Project now? 350, something like that, I would suspect. No, I haven't looked at that in a while. I thought maybe you guys might know. So anyway, that can adjust the cost. You can prorate the cost so you get better quality. It's not just a one-for-one. So then the last one on that exhibit would be just using wet year purchases on the west side. They have some surplus water. That still happens, believe it or not. And if you could find a way to purchase some of that water and exchange it for LA Aqueduct water, that would be a viable option too. So all these things have this one player still in every one of them, and that's LADWP. So that would be that you buy stuff on what they call the spot market, Jim, and You've got some surplus water, they could do with it what the heck they wanted to. They could bank it, they could take it into their system what they wanted to do, and then we get, again, some ratio of that deposited here in the Indian Wells Valley for subsequent recovery. Now, you'll hear a lot about treating that water coming from LADWP, because if we want to take it directly, that's what we have to do. The problem with that is if you're only getting the water once in a while, you've got this treatment plant that costs a lot of money that's sitting there doing nothing. Meanwhile, if we had, the patience, so we could recharge it, the earth filters the water. We don't have to treat it except for chlorination, and it would cost a lot less money. So those are the options. In fact, we've sent letters to LADWP back in, I want to say like 93, 94, talking about these options. And again, this is all part of the long-term negotiation that we had, where we thought was going to be fruitful, but ultimately they sidelined it. So those are the three mechanisms for utilizing the aqueducts to get the water here. So those are all outside the valley options that we've looked at over the years. And I think that kind of summarizes the various sources that we've looked at. I don't want to go into detail on all the costs for every one of these little things, because that'll be a little mind-numbing. But again, the important thing to know is that you're looking at something, I don't know what we're paying an acre-foot now for the cost of a well amortized. We can run that calculator, but it's probably around $200 an acre-foot, maybe $250. So any of these still are looking at, 4 times, 5 times or more of what we currently spend.
I believe the last number we published was like 187, I think it was.
Yeah, 187. So it's still really low for water.
Well, that's not exactly what I said. I said when you open up a board comment, I'd like to start out, since I sort of instituted this.
Are you pretty well wrapped up there?
I'm getting close. I had a couple other comments that I wanted to make. The other things that we've done is we've entertained outside consultants. In 1997, there was a group called SAMDA. You remember SAMDA, Judy?
Oh, yeah.
And SAMDA was a guy named Todd Tatum. Todd Tatum was going to come and solve all of our ills.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that, Larry?
I remember that.
Yeah. So that was 97. Of course, it didn't get wings. It didn't get off the ground because the costs were crazy, and it was a private venture, and all the contracts that they wanted to have signed kind of burdened the district, but didn't really look like there's too much security behind their existence. And so I think that, if you don't know the company that you're doing business with, may or may not be there. And ultimately, a couple of years later, they turned out not to be there, and renamed it, I think, not Capital Corp, but something else. Anyway, so that's coming. We've done a couple of those. Yeah.
If you recall, and you can pass it on and then I won't get it. The board also emphasized that this was something that the water district should not do by itself.
As I recall, and the board emphasized this, that the water district should not take on something like this by themselves.
But
Gotcha.
repeatedly.
Well said.
Thank you. So,
Chuck, that's why some individuals tried to bring LADWP into it
okay.
years ago.
Yeah, that was all, well, they did. The
We did.
SAMDA did too. The SAMDA was,
We brought it in first,
oh, okay.
and all we got was fought with. But that was what needed to happen, was somebody with some power.
Yeah. And they have that for sure. So all of these efforts, by the way, I forgot to make this statement at the beginning. The district had concluded back in the early 90s that the district needed to do things to demonstrate to those outside the valley that we were serious about conservation, we were serious about management, we were serious about exploration, That's why we did the pilot testing of the desalting plant. We wanted to have real evidence to those people outside the valley, perhaps even in another county, that this is a responsible water district trying to manage the best they could before we came up and said, help us, help us, help us. We've pumped only from one spot and now our wells are contaminated, and darn, we didn't know we had these other opportunities. And so I think that's still something that's very important as the discussions here keep going to other political bodies, is that the district has not been idly ignoring the other opportunities. They've been investigating them and trying to extend the life as best they can, and continue to today. Now, I think that pretty much wraps it up.
I wasn't trying to push you.
No, I got you.
Anyway, we're going to open it up for discussion with the board. Ron?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you, Chuck. I mean, you're right, this grew out of the Water Management Committee, myself and David St. Armand, when we started talking these issues, and then brought to the board to bring you here. So I truly appreciate it. And I want to make it clear that the reason I think it's important that we talk about these things and brainstorm it and reopen this is the fact that where the GA is headed could be a cost that maybe isn't the best for our ratepayers and the financial stability of the district. That there may be things that we as a district on our own can do things to find that additional water that we require. And that is my, I don't want to duplicate things that the GA is doing. I want to enhance them. And if it takes the district to do that, I think it's important to the district and the ratepayers, because when you start looking at the projected cost of what it's going to cost to purchase augmented water, it's getting pretty extreme. And so my thought was, can we as a district do something that will better serve our ratepayers and keep us financially sound? And that's why I wanted to bring these back again. I think every one of them, I think that's what's happened is the nature of the political and the environmental and every part of that climate has changed. I think reinvestigating some of these things may be well worthwhile. There may be some right away we can say, we can't go there. You know, the community dam idea, the galleries, that's all on base property, is it not? I believe it would be.
I don't think the base, no, we're talking up the hill.
Oh, way up the hill,
Yeah,
okay.
on the other side of the highway.
And that's, I don't want to go into individual comments on these, and maybe we can do that, maybe President Cordell wants to go through them one at a time for comments and discussion. I think
But
that'd be
that's
worth it.
wilderness now.
Yeah, and so the point I'm trying to make is that it's important that we approach this with an open mind. I want people, and the reason we're doing this workshop is think outside the box. There are going to be things we haven't thought of. And the next thing I'd like to leave here with, if possible, is maybe by an agreement with the board that we can form, assign your group, somebody's group, something to continue working on these. And obviously the cost will need to be compared to what's being proposed by the GA. And we know there's two big projects the GA is proposing. One is the AVEC pipeline, and then the other one would be the wheeling of the water by LIWV in exchange. And I don't think I'm saying anything that people don't know that I already believe. I already believe that the cost of the AVEC, when it comes to capital costs for these projects, if we work hard enough, we can probably find money that's out there, be it Fed, state, or whatever, so we can offset the cost of the capital. My concern with a project like the AVEC project is the yearly operational fees as well as the water purchase fees. It could easily come to an equivalent to what the water district's total revenue is already. Easily.
Sure.
Okay. And to me, to try to put that burden on this valley is I won't say inexcusable. We have to find something else. Because everybody thinks that, we have the lowest water prices and we could charge double and all that kind of stuff, but I don't want to use that as a reason for not exploring possibilities. And of course, then the other project being the one with LIWP, which we all know that is mostly a political issue that maybe we can resolve and by a no harm issue or some agreement that we come up with is a possibility as well. But what people don't realize there is that as far as we got at LIWP, and correct me if I'm wrong, Don, is at one point they said, if you can get this agreement that everyone's happy, we'll pay to put the infrastructure in for water banking. Our cost would be how we get the water from there to here. They put that system in. And so that really belays the cost of capital infrastructure for the water banking. And then the operational costs are less. And of course, we're water banking, so it has to do with agreements with how we're banking. But it also gives us a conduit if we ever are able to do a no-harm water exchange. The infrastructure's there already. I think you said it yourself, you already have an infrastructure. You can start water banking, and at one point you can say, okay, maybe we can come to an agreement for some kind of exchange down Daybeck versus whatever. So that's no secret, that's not what I believe. The whole basis of this is to keep the cost to the people in the valley as low as possible. Is it going to go up? Yes, it's going to go up. But do I believe bills should double? It's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to accomplish here. By looking at these things in the district, I think we owe it to the district, we owe it to our ratepayers to look at the most economical way to do this. And how that fits in with what Stetson's doing, whether we end up working with them or not working with them, I think we as a district have the responsibility to pursue this and to come up with ideas and present them, and let's see where it falls. Obviously, we're going to need each other, the GA and the water district. But when it boils down to it, the bulk of any payments that are taking place and bills taking place will occur through the water district ratepayers, period. And that's what my concern is. So I wanted to make that clear before we proceed. And I'd like to see us proceed with looking at these ideas, Chuck, and maybe going through one at a time, any comments from the board and the public, any ideas, and then maybe come up with some other ideas that we can find. And then go from there and say, now what can we do to start working on these again? Because things have changed. I mean, look at the dates these are done.
Yeah.
The whole political climate with SGMA and everything else that's going to happen. There may be other opportunities here, or things that we thought in the past weren't worth looking at because of the extreme costs and political issues. It might be worth it now. And so, there, I kept it as brief as I could. And
Well, go ahead, Ian. Use your allotted time then.
can I have your time? and if you wanted to, it's my recommendation would be maybe work through these one at a time, briefly, to see if there's any comments from the board on each of them, and Tim as well. I mean, because you know our district as well as any, and see how we could either resurrect them, or even do we want to consider them. And I think that as time goes on, we're going to see what the cost is going to be for augmented water, how the GA is going to work out. And everyone needs to remember, I'm one person on that board. And so all I can do is try to influence based on maybe things that we're doing here and working on. So my recommendation, Chuck, is maybe you want to go through one group at a time and see if anybody's got any comments or ideas on it.
Well, let's go ahead and see if Don has any comments on it. And I would like to bring Tim into the sequence also with us.
I think, Ron's hitting the nail on the head. To me, the biggest question in my mind is, I believe there's a lot of brackish water in the valley. Should we be exploring converting that to potable water? We'd have to build a plant. We'd have to probably take it off the base, do some negotiations there. But is that the most reliable source?
It's reliable because it's there. It's here already.
It's here already.
It's always easier to develop a water source in your valley than looking at all the complexities that are associated with the exchange. I think it all gets down to the dollars, but some communities do that. I think Fallon, Nevada does that, don't they? They have treatment for every bit of their drinking water. So I don't know what the latest thought is on.
We have the brackish water project that is working already.
That's the resources project, right? That you had a resource assessment?
Duncan.
It's a feasibility study.
Yeah.
To look at, try to determine, quantify the amount of brackish water within the basin, and then the feasibility of treating that water at an economic price, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and you get to a point where Judy said earlier, 30 years later, you can say, oh, it's paid for itself now.
Yes, but the brackish water is part of the total water supply that we are short of.
But I mean, you're still taking.
It's not no water, so it wouldn't address the deficit in the basin.
Right.
That's what I would ask Tim.
Better use
Is it considered part of our aquifer? Would we'd still be lowering the level in our aquifer? How does that fit in with SGMA requirements?
It's interesting because that aquifer was de-designated, I think, as as M&I, right, by the Navy. But that's the constraint. It's on the Navy property, largely. And when we went through this process, we put wells, tried to put wells on the base, and then they got pushed off, so we decided to try it horizontal and go under the base. No. And one of the big issues there is this is fine grained material. When you start moving water out of it, even if it's in the sand stringers, there could be some subsidence, and the snort track is there. And that's been one of the drivers in the GSP is this snort track. Although when I talk to some of the retired Navy folks, they say they hardly ever use the snort track. So I don't know, but it's got some, yeah, I don't know. But it's really a driver for that whole issue is the snort track. And it's in a really tectonically active basin. I'm kind of struggling with it, you know, because it's hard to keep the ground level over in that area anyway, I think, with the tectonics. But that's one of the big constraints. Most of the brackish water's on the base, and the base doesn't want some sort of private well in there that they don't operate.
Well, I think what they said early on too is the fact that they didn't want to be a beta tester for the wells being on the base. They wanted to do the testing off base first to see what kind of subsidence would result. And based on the results, they might consider allowing something onto the base. But they didn't want us going onto the base and doing initial drilling and testing on the base.
Yeah, that was basically to capture the high quality water as it's moving towards the playa, and there are no other users at the base borderline to the east. I mean, I think that was the concept, because then we wouldn't be taking the water out and recharging canyons to the downstream folks, the co-ops and farmers would be adversely affected. That's what we, in my recollection, when we first talked about doing that. That was Don Joe was a supporter of that idea.
But the brackish water project's evolving,
Right.
you know, and so we're looking at a horizontal well along that boundary and taking the water out of these sand stringers that are within the clay that have brackish water in them. And so we have had some challenges with the model that has been constructed for it. It's a regional model, and we're looking at a local project. So
Right.
that's kind of the next step, and we've done some detailed geologic analysis to try to figure out what actually needs to be put in the model, a smaller version of the model.
That's got to be a huge challenge for this valley. I don't think I know the valley is more complex when it comes to.
You know, and the question comes up, is that a long-term solution or is it a stopgap?
I think it's both, if you think about it, because if you go to the capital costs of building a plant, then you can use it for a number of different purposes. One is, you know, short-term kind of soft landing for some things, but it could also be used for an emergency supply down the road. It could also be used to help treat areas where there's water quality issues, where the TDS, and we've seen the TDS kind of going up over time. So if you have the plant, you can try to make it multi-purpose.
But I guess what I'm asking is that, let's say that, you know, it's been said that we need 4,000 to 5,000 acre feet a year here in the valley. Could that be the permanent source of that, and would still qualify under Sigma for the level in our aquifer? In other words, will it affect the level in our aquifer such that we won't be complying with Sigma's requirements?
Well, I think it would shift. The water levels declines.
Okay.
So it would move spatially where you're having declines, and it might help stabilize that.
Okay.
So, and that's what DWR is looking at. They're looking at both the water budget, but also analytically they look at declines as the key indicator for whether or not you're dealing with your basin appropriately.
All right. I mean, I guess that's, it helps me understand better, because obviously what we're looking here for is a long-term solution that's going to be economically viable.
Right, and for this basin, it's going to have to be a portfolio of options.
Right, exactly.
Obviously,
We've
yeah.
said that, yeah.
Yeah,
Everything from the wastewater, you know, we're dealing with the city here, do we have, what water's available there? You're right, it's a combination of things, and of course, that's not on here as one of the projects is looking at what.
We never really spent
city.
too much time because
Yeah, but it's becoming, it's, you know, I don't know how far along they are, they've been working on it for 20 years now, staying or something, where they're going to be with this, but I mean, that's a potential solution for a couple thousand acre feet of water that we should be involved in. And And I'll bring up one other one that's way out of whack. Why do we buy water from Randsburg? They take theirs out of Fremont Valley, is that correct?
That's correct.
I mean, is there ramifications there? Is it something we can work through? Is it a possibility?
I don't know how much water is there.
How much?
Um,
Yeah.
Any,
You know?
Hardly any?
uh, a typical, you can just put it way up there. A typical water bill for the Ransford Red Mountain area is usually way over $100. They have 3 wells. I believe they keep one in reserves and have 2 operating. And there again, their water is down along the Garlock Fault actually, and they pipe it all the way to Ransford and Red Mountain. Long pipeline.
But I'm talking about getting it from them themselves, not, they got the infrastructure to get it from Fremont Valley. I'm just saying that we need to think outside the box. Is there a possibility there? Is there water available? Is it something we could politically make happen?
I don't think Fremont Valley is the proper box.
You know, but we need to look at it. I think just saying no at this point, everything should be on the table.
I got a big one.
Yeah. But that's another idea. So that's what I hope to happen, and we hear some other thoughts as well. Although you've covered some pretty good, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's been a lot of energy over the years, sure.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to get on the microphone, Larry. Unfortunately.
Son of a gun.
I know the feeling.
Too far away from my recorder.
Because your voice is so hard to hear, Larry.
Yeah. President Cordell, is one of your people studying the Irwin project for Garlock area and Cantel and all that?
I'm not.
No,
Oh,
I can't answer that.
okay.
Remember the project.
Can you enlighten us?
No one's following down there the excess water that's available for growth?
No,
Oh, okay.
Well, enlighten us.
We'll talk.
we need to talk.
Okay.
Little side note, when you talk about Randsburg, I was talking to one of the people from Randsburg, and they were saying that between the wells where they're pumping the meters there and what they're getting at the tank, there's a 40% loss.
That's not leaky.
I'm sorry.
Oh, wow.
It's an old system. It's a big lift. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on that pipe that
All this money's
from the wells up.
It causes a lot of
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, if you get involved with Randsburg, you want to take them on because it's a big move for consolidation of the state. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's another thing, big move for consolidating small water districts.
Right.
It's actually been brought up by the state.
It is,
in the
we're
past,
done. Things
seem to have settled down in here, and we haven't heard anything from them in probably over a year and a half or so. From what I understand, there's still some turmoil up in Mansburg with the board.
Go figure.
Yeah.
We definitely want to make sure, Larry, that you get with Don and go over what you're talking about, because we don't.
Where do I pick up my check for consulting?
Nope.
Work for Chuck.
I saw the point before the verb.
You said I had to be at the mic and it wouldn't record
Well, let
me.
me ask a question here. Why can't we discuss it any further? Is there something confidential about it, or you just don't
No,
want
if
to
you
bring it
guys
up
are
here?
busy, I didn't.
No, that's what this is all
It's a
about.
workshop, so.
No, This is a
Oh,
workshop. This is, you know,
well, this has been going on for 2 or 3 years. They hired a firm to study their, in the urban projects like they have that you're attending up in Bishop, Don. And
Elena, you're coming to the mic to explain this?
they're forming their Irwin for that area. And they've got about 6,000 acre foot of water that they are setting aside for growth and ag. And I just thought that, I thought Jim was for, because I think McMurtry was following it. He was on all the mailing lists.
Gene's retired. I haven't, you know.
This has been going on for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, no, I haven't, Gene hasn't mentioned it.
Oh, okay.
I don't see Gene that often. And I was familiar with his work in the Fremont Valley project.
Yeah, because he was,
That's right, yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Gene was working with, what's his name, Gardner?
Keith
Yeah,
Gardner.
that was on the Fremont Valley.
Yeah,
event.
and that was-
Discussed
they
with
were-
GA.
Yeah, they were all down there on that project.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But I don't think Gene's involved with that anymore. If I
Yeah,
don't
that
know
kind
if it's
of-
going.
Yeah.
Elaine?
That's why I don't want to start
Can you
talking.
repeat everything Larry said since he wasn't in the mic and we can get on the record?
No.
Oh.
I'm not his mouthpiece.
Go ahead,
My
Elaine.
name's Elaine Mead. Everybody has one of these, okay? All you do is type in Fremont Valley Water, and you'll get everything you need to know, and all of their meetings are posted on YouTube.
All of the Randsburg board meetings, is that what you're saying?
No, the Fremont Valley Irwin
Oh, the
meetings.
Irwin meetings, okay.
And part of what they're doing is rolling it into a groundwater sustainability plan.
That's the ultimate goal.
That's our goal too.
They're pretty organized. They've allocated their waters and it's real pretty interesting.
I still think that one of our main pursuits should be a city reclamation project.
Yeah.
And we can talk about it forever, that's available, it's sitting there. We need to get with the city, get it ironed out, and try to get something going on it. That's our fastest, quickest way to do it. IWV, they may say something today, but it ain't gonna be the same thing they're gonna say tomorrow. And that's been just an experience for me listening to what's going on. We need to get going on something.
Yeah, Don's been talking to Ron Strand, I know he has, and I haven't got an update on that or where they are with it, but we're right in the middle of that.
I know that they had talked about the best thing that could be for the city between a couple different subjects, us and somebody else. But the city depends on us for water. We should be number one choice, no matter what.
I would hope so.
So,
Yeah.
Larry?
I don't know the new kids down at LA BWP anymore, but what little we know about those guys is probably exists the same today. The problem when we worked with them was they want this valley to all be on the same page. They do not want you to bring a program down to them from the water district and all the rest of the players are bringing other programs. They want you guys all to be on the same team and no conflicts,
Right.
okay? And I would imagine it's the same today. And that's just a little tidbit from an old guy. But they're not gonna work with you unless you're all on the same page.
I agree with that, yes. Most definitely.
He's been using that old guy line for 25 years now.
So how do you make that happen?
That's a good question.
I mean,
I don't think we're gonna solve that here. I mean,
No, but.
Yeah, but you're right, that is one of the biggest things, is like, Don's already said it, LAVP made it clear, unless all the players are a win-win situation, then we're not moving very far on this, and our job is how can that happen? And that's even part of what maybe, whatever we form out of this workshop, could begin to work on. What constitutes a win-win situation? Tim's idea of no harm, as good as that sounds, in my opinion, the stance that he was taking, if LAVP is mentioned at all, they're off the table. But I think we have to find something. What are we giving to Inyo? What are we supporting that will help them as well? And so we need to look at those things. And some of them are political, some of them may be other projects that are outside of our scope that we support. I don't know what the answer is. But obviously, if we're going to get water from there somehow, whether based on the exchange, heck, if we wouldn't even get our water here from the ranch, we need the LAVP.
Right.
And so something needs to be, we need to continue to work on that one. And I believe that that's going to be the GA, it's going to be our elected representatives, everyone's going to need help on that one. Because I just don't know what the answer is unless someone's got a magic bullet.
Right, so I guess how do you take it from here is what I was trying to get at. And that seems to me if you get the right, you have to start somewhere. So is that getting all the people together in one room and just starting to talk about it?
You're right, I'm willing. I think that, anybody in this case needs a point man on it. And I know that we talk about it at the GA as well, especially in light of what's some of the comments being made most recently by Inyo. That we realize that we need to work on that, and we are. Recently myself and David and Don went down to Inyo Associates meeting and touched with some of the supervisors. They're not all dead set against, but they're basically as a whole, as a group, supporting each other. The fact that they don't want to deal with anything that's going to affect or involve LAUWP that's going to assist our valley at this point. But that doesn't mean it's not something we can do. But we can talk to them.
But it needs to be done in coordination, with the GA.
Yes.
Because they're also addressing this, and you don't want to
That's right.
say inconsistent things to them. So, we have to work with the GA on these things.
But I think you said it right. I think it involves whether it be the members of the GA or their boards, just, if nothing else, just getting to know the people. Who's involved? Who are the people? I'm not saying making any deals or anything. I'm just saying just open up the conversation. Say, we're here to help. What can we do to make this work? And I think that's where it's got to start.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you need somebody that's unbiased, say like an outside facilitator to help with something like that, and put it in a neutral kind of a setting? I mean, is that something that people would be willing to consider? That's kind of the way some of these discussions start.
Yeah, at this particular time, I don't know where that needs to go, but it's something that we continue to need to work on. We're going to be talking about it, and we can talk about it forever. Eventually, something needs to be done.
Right now, you have Inyo County saying, no, 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 no. You're gonna have to stop that to start with.
Right.
At least give them, like you said, some kind of negotiating terms.
But
At least talk to them, take them to lunch or something.
But there's got to be something. I mean, there's all kinds of ideas. What can we do up in Inyo County that will benefit them? I'm not saying it won't cost us anything, but what will benefit them? And they need money. We know that. And
Right.
But is it worth it for us to spend money there and the GA to spend money there as opposed to the projects that are going on? And the answer might be yes. But like I said, the purpose is to explore every possibility and at least get it out there so people are talking about it. Because we're in a situation here that I know I'm resolved to making it work. I hope that everybody in the GA here is, and everybody on this board is, and we want to keep this community as a viable community. In order to do that, we've got to look at all the possibilities and continue to talk about it. And my proposal is that somehow we open these up again and do a look at them with the new technology, new climate, new engineering ideas, and see where these take us. And it may be that we find things out that are better coordinated with the GA. And then because all that has to be coordinated. But the basis is, if it comes out that the water district is responsible for purchasing augmented water, anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 acre-feet a year at a price set by the GA, it may behoove us to find our own. It might be cheaper. It might not be. Then we're set.
Well, there's one other thing again, though, too, Ron. I mean, less than 2 miles from here, we have 2,000 acre-feet sitting over there. I think we need to get it on and start figuring out what we want to do with the water that's sitting here already that we can attack and get.
Are you talking about up at?
I'm talking the sewer plant.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's what we're working on that, and they know we're working on it. We're involved with that.
Yeah, I think you're further away from talking to LA and Inyo, and you are to get that water that's sitting.
I mean, I would love to have an agreement with the city that says, hey, we're going to work with you, and that 2,000 acre-feet of water you're going to somehow own it, buy it, whatever it may be, and then we're halfway to our problem solving.
Yeah.
And I agree. I don't disagree with that. It's one of the top things on the list.
Yeah.
That's the low-hanging fruit, but
Yes.
what about the to each of, is that going to get resolved, or?
There's action underway, but it's too early to predict what the
Yeah, it's
We would
slow.
move them back where they came from, or what?
Well, I mean,
That has been recommended.
they were imported, we all know that, so.
Yeah, they're not native.
So it's, I mean, that, to me, that was one of the first things I stumbled on coming in here is, what the heck is that? And And, you know, and the other part of that is, and I know it's far along, is that the right place for a plant if you're looking at using that water potentially for replenishment part of the time, or are you gonna look at potable reuse? You know, I mean, those are the kind of questions that also need to kind of come up, because where the plant is, you know, you can't simply infiltrate water and then you're talking about piping and an injection and it raises the cost, so.
Yeah, the city knows that, but the trouble is, they've been in negotiations, and Stan, correct me if I'm wrong, are they this close or this close to sign the Navy?
I'll speak to that.
I would wish you would, because you're very familiar with it and how far along, because I want to agree that that should be our number 1 priority. That is the low-hanging fruit that if we can get our hands on, really helps. And I'd like to know where they are with it. It sounds, I thought they were signing the paper to do it where it is. You know, I don't know.
I'm gonna go ahead and let Pat and Judy talk, and then we'll go to you, Stan. Pat?
Chuck, I think you're right about the LADWP option as a solution. The board member, Vallejo, on the GA, keeps reminding us that that's unfair to keep holding that out there as an option because it won't work. We need to listen to what he's saying, and Matt Kingsley will tell you not one drop of water will go from here to Indian Valley. And when they keep saying no, 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 and then working with the LADWP for people who have been here for a while, know how there's just too many. I mean, they're too powerful. They're not going to be that concerned about our needs, and I think we should be spending time working on more viable options. There are other viable options. We need to do some exploration about water that we may have up in the El Paso. I've said this a lot of times. That seems that we want to ignore the fact and ignore the evidence that we have of available water that's a lot closer than AVAC or anywhere else. So if we're going to look at viable options, let's look at something that may show evidence of real potential.
Thanks, Pat. Judy?
Well, I would like to reemphasize what I said to you earlier. You need to explore the viability of helping communities in Inyo County. I think that's one way to get some influence there. I think it's important to do that. It might even be more important than taking over the water systems of Rendsburg. Because a third of our recharge comes from the north. You need to remember that. We do have a DRI model that has shown us additional things that we did not know. The other thing I wanted to say to you about the reclaimed water is, here's a suggestion. Buy the sewer water, the whole shebang, the plant, everything from the city of Ridgecrest. Then you will control the water at both ends of the pipeline and can operate with it as you best see fit.
Thanks, Judy. That's a good point.
Desert Water Agency in the city of Palm Springs purchases secondary treated water from the city's treatment plant, puts it through tertiary treatment, and reuses it. So that's another option, where the city keeps their plant and we take the water and refine it for reuse. Yeah, we did. Boy, I had another point when Judy made, I can't remember what that was, so never mind.
We're gonna go to Stan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The very first topic we talked about was the galleries, and it sounded like we just didn't want to address the environmental and the water rights issues.
Those two?
or at least those were stumbling blocks.
Yes.
My feeling is that the GA has a lot of water rights issues going on right now, and adding one more is just adding one more. The GA in theory is responsible for seeing that everybody has adequate water relative to what they're supposed to deserve. So my feeling is this is a good time to open things back up and look at those galleries if they really do possibly show some improvement, and the cost is definitely right if it works. So my feeling is we need to revisit that. And by the way, before I go on, I want to second what Ron said, is write down some of the costs that we're looking at that the GA has been pushing are, they may be what we have to pay, but we certainly want to make sure we turn over every stone and look out of every box we can before we start putting our people through that, especially if it's an unnecessary cost. So we need to pursue this. No question about that.
Quick question about the galleries, because I have it written here. How does that affect our recharge? If the gallery idea was to work, and we got it through, how does that affect our recharge? Are we taking water before it reaches our recharge, and that's just something?
Well, that's something, that's just one other thing that needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
Obviously, if some of that was evaporated before it got down, is it more efficient and effective to take it earlier in the stream? Another thing you and I were talking about, Ron, was looking at, I think the Bulletin 218 gets revised every 2 years or 4 years, something like that. If indeed we need to revise that Bulletin 218 to ensure that it becomes part of our aquifer, or at least our, what's the other term, the flow?
Watershed.
Yeah, watershed. We need to do that as well. But that, if there's any potential there, we need to look into it, my feeling is. I've been hearing that there's been some progress being in reverse osmosis in terms of getting the cost down. Are you aware of anything?
Well, I think that's true, but I'm not going to be able to cite any estimated dollars for this.
Okay. Anyway, I've been told that the energy is one of the big costs.
Certainly is.
For doing the process. The plant is not cheap, but it's the ongoing O&M costs. And in theory, I've been told that Lockheed, of all people, I normally think of them as building airplanes. They've developed a new fiber filter of some sort that reduces significantly the energy required. And so, if indeed that makes a difference in terms of some of the costs and things we're looking at, we need to follow up. I guess I have personally reservations regarding brackish water. In terms of a long-range solution to any of our problems, we have a model. We really need, if the model is working, that is the groundwater model, we need to be able to identify exactly how pulling water out of one place isn't affecting the water in some other place. I understand it's not like putting a straw in a glass and sucking it out, but that water does move, and we need to be very careful about where we take that water out. One of the things that Mrs. Ferris mentioned was the El Paso area and potential exploration. I keep seeing some well levels down there, some of the monitoring well levels going up and consistently going up for years on end. Doesn't mean there's a real water supply down there, but the well water levels are going up, and we do need to investigate to see if that's a reality or not, because that's only half a dozen to a dozen miles south of here. It'd be a lot cheaper to pump water in 8 or 10 miles than it is going down to Lancaster or Palmdale.
Is El Paso included in the
Yes.
GSP?
Yes.
It's in the Bulletin 118 boundary.
It's in our aquifer, if that's what you're referring to,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Although right now, what they're talking about is putting another monitoring well down there, Well, that's really not the issue. What we need to know is there really any water resources that can be pumped? It may be that, there's not more than 100 acre feet a year down there, and so it'd be a waste of money to put down a well and viaduct to pull it up here. But if there is more, we need to know.
I think that Tim has a comment on that.
Yeah, actually, Stan, I think the idea is to put in a well that's going to be good enough and big enough and deep enough to pump and monitor other wells with that, so we actually get some aquifer testing out of it.
Which is the first step that we had proposed with DWP.
Right.
The El Paso Basin is where we had proposed the banking program with DWP. And of course, understanding the lithology and the aquifer is hugely important. So if it's not done for the LADWP part, you have to do something like that before you plan to build a big pipeline.
Right. You were talking earlier about the state water project, but you didn't mention the federal, I guess it's a central water project. Is there anything that we've looked at? Because it seems to me that it's the federal water project that might be getting additional flows through it with the modification of the environmental impact statement that Trump recently, in Bakersfield, you probably saw on the news where Trump signed this final EIS notification. So there may be more water flowing in the state water project. I mean, the Central Valley.
Yeah, we have not, in my history here, we have not looked at any of the federal projects.
Stan, I thought the governor was trying to block that, though.
He's already filed a lawsuit.
Oh, he's going to try.
Yeah.
But whether or not he can control the federal water is a separate issue, and he can stop it from on the state water project side, unquestionably, if his lawsuit goes through. But that doesn't mean he can stop the federal water project, the Central Valley.
I think they can probably slow it down through a lawsuit by saying it's bad science. That's what they're trying to do, is change the science, so they're not having to shut it down, and they're just going to challenge the scientific findings.
It'll be challenged. There's no question about that. But nonetheless, if there's a possibility, we probably should understand is there any indirect benefit, say, of having LA get more water through the federal water project and take less water from Inyo, perhaps. And if there's less surface water taken from Inyo might be a little bit more willing to help us. I don't know. It's a thought. We got to be, again, it's that box we got to work. We got to get out of that box.
Think about it.
Okay, in talking about Inyo, I guess my feeling is that Inyo's going to want a good deal. And I don't blame them for that. They've been working this problem for well over 100 years, I think, with LADWP. And their attitude is their attitude, and we're not going to do anything about that. But they have recently shown some interest in geothermal exploration. If there would be a way of getting water for Inyo for geothermal work, I mean, actually, California needs geothermal. Our valley needs geothermal. I think, it would be a win-win for everybody, including California, if indeed we could figure out a way of getting Inyo some water. And Inyo needs the tax money that could be generated. And Coastal could also use some water. So I think there's an opportunity there to perhaps have a win-win or win. And then, so I think we need to explore, and Inyo needs tax base for sure. So, Don, did you?
Well, I was just going to say, to your point of it with brackish, the brackish feasibility study, that's one potential source for the brine that comes off of the treatment, is to go to COSA. So there's a source of water for them right there.
And is the coastal a fraction of your production capability right now?
I'm sorry.
I thought COSA was at a fraction, in other words, the more they produce, the more returns to Inyo County. And they're not producing as much as they can because they need the brackish water. And if they can get the full potential, that results in
Yeah,
Inyo County benefiting as well.
Right.
right. And I guess I've never heard anybody claim that COSA has done an experiment with brackish water. In being able to use brackish water rather than something that's better, is it gonna plug up their geothermal? I mean, do we actually know what the impact after 20 years of using brackish water on their geothermal?
That's all they use now.
Yeah.
Well, they use brackish, but we're talking about really brackish. And we're talking about brine, which is brackish of brackish.
But it would be injector, not going directly into the process.
Yeah, and it could be blended, you know, I mean, I think that from what we've heard from COSO is that they're willing to take the brine. They're one of the potential people that would be willing to take it. So that's a positive. And that's one thing that, you know, going back to talking with Inyo, I don't think COSO's ever been involved with those discussions. And that might be another angle to combine, you know, water resources with geothermal. And, you know, we haven't looked at all the possibilities there, you know?
So Tim, do you, pardon me, Stan, I know it's weird, I was doing the same thing earlier. What's the evaporative loss on the playa annually?
It's varied. I mean, I think it's been on the order of
40 to 60.
Yeah, yeah.
How many acre feet is that?
Good question, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
They're still up in the hundreds of acre feet a year. It's been going down.
Yeah, I mean, it
With
was.
evaporation?
The water level has been going down, the evaporation on the playa,
Okay, well, I'm just, because that's why, if you could stop that withdrawal from the bank.
It's already stopped.
Yeah, I mean, it's gone way down. The first estimate, I think, was around 6,000 or 7,000 acre feet a year. And it's gone way down from that. I'm not sure what it is now.
Still above 1,000.
Yeah,
That's just-
I think it's 1,000 or
If you
so.
could,
but-
if you could allow, if the Navy would allow us to get close enough to the
Right.
playa to pull water out there so that the overall net use between the playa and that brackish water, then that's a, you know, zero-sum game and you'd be good. But like, my concern is when you are pulling out brackish water and you're affecting the water level and the full aquifer capacity, you know, is Sigma going to support that?
Well, that's what the brackish water pilot's all about, the feasibility study, is to try to learn more about that. And we're getting to a point where, you know, we're putting together, the engineer on that's putting together information on what a well would cost, what it would cost, where it would go, and to do a pumping test as a first step to get more information on how viable it is to design the well, and that's really where we are right now. We've just taken some more detailed look at the geology in that area, including the seismic work. And I just, you know, are you done, Stan? Do you have some more stuff?
Oh, yeah, I still have.
Well, I'll hold
But
off,
you-
because
I mean,
I don't know.
See, I don't know a lot about the brackish stuff, all right?
Right.
That's been done behind some meeting rooms that I'm not exposed to, so I don't want to badmouth it. On the other hand, I want to see some definite positive improvements before we spend any more real money on it. We need to see some output. The last thing I want to talk about is I went to the city's infrastructure committee meeting last week. The wastewater treatment plant was on the agenda. And the end result was they had to postpone the report until the following month because they hadn't been able to get the Navy to get together and have their phone call to discuss where they were. So now the discussions began in 2012 in earnest to get a new contract. Originally they were talking about an easement, and then I pointed out that if we're paying them continuing year after year for a easement, that's really a lease. That's not. The Navy, if you add up what they need for the Tui Chub and the golf course, it amounts to like 55% of the total amount of recycled wastewater. They're producing roughly 28% of the total, but they want over 50% of the recycled water. And part of that is actually coming from the schools, Sierra Sands schools, which Sierra Sands, I believe, pays the Navy to process the sewage. So we are 8 years into negotiations. And to my knowledge, we've made perhaps a little progress, but my feeling is we shouldn't be paying rent for basically BLM land. So we need to get the city to work with us, and we need to force the issue. There's roughly, in 2017, I believe there was 2,500 acre feet a year of water. It's been going down for the last several years because people aren't using as much water. And it's probably going to go down a little bit more over the next years because we're going to be forced to conserve.
Right.
But there still will be at least 2,000 acre feet. And that would go a long way to solving our problem.
Stan, a quick question. The idea of them staying where they are and renegotiating the lease or whatever you want to call it, as opposed to moving it to another location that doesn't involve the Navy so much. Was there a cost estimate? Is that the big holdup with the city? Is there a big cost? I'm sure there is.
There is. Well, if they do have cost estimates for both places. They're both very soft. I don't think either one of them is probably accurate. There's a additional lift that has to be put in place. But it's not going to cost what they claim it's going to cost. I've seen 3 cost estimates for it, and they range anywhere from $2 million to $5 million. So we need to have real cost estimates. There are cost estimates, but in my mind, it's very soft. So whatever. We need the water. It doesn't matter what it costs.
Larry, you have something?
I'm a little, like Stan, I'm a little more conservative, no matter, it doesn't matter what it costs, but one of the options with a couple thousand acre feet is get Searles Valley independent. That's another option to treat water out there. If the GA was cooperative, it just put a valve in that pipeline and always give them the option that they could open that valve back up and always get water from here. Don't cut them off, but treat some of that water out there. That's been discussed in the past, and I don't know what happened to that idea, but that's a good option. That could be fast tracked. They have energy out there. They got solar. I mean, we have those options. They could be done quick.
Hi, Mallory Boyd. I didn't get up in front of George in time. That was one of my items as well, that we look at options, as Ron had suggested earlier, the things that haven't been identified by Capital Corps. If we could develop the water there, we don't know what I don't think we have as much knowledge about the TDS levels of waters in Searle Valley, but it would seem prudent to do some well development testing, particularly in the south end of the valley. Obviously, reducing our use, that's all part of this. We haven't talked about that today, but it's part of our ultimate strategy because we know we don't have enough. It was mentioned earlier about water treatment. I want to re-emphasize, I think I've mentioned this and several times I've been at the podium, that tertiary treatment really ought to be a focus for recycling. And thoughts of blue line installations or purple line installations to move water around, just to be using it only once more instead of using it perpetually, I think needs to be emphasized in our thinking. About 3 weeks ago, I had an opportunity to sit down for an afternoon with Dave Wirtz. Any of you here have had that opportunity to talk with Dave? So Dave, he's an engineer at heart, a good one, he's apolitical, so he's not looking at any of the environmental issues or wilderness issues, regulation issues, but he's done a pretty nice chunk of work on South Fork diversion. Want to offer a comment on the geothermal. When they drilled the wells up there, the water that they used for initial production of geothermal in the valley was sucked. I mean, that water was very poor TDS. So the thought of having poor water going up there and supplementing their operations being a problem, it's not. They can deal with some pretty crappy water without contaminating the source of production. And Judy mentioned about a third of our water coming from the north. We need to be a little bit careful about our Rose Valley implications. I know we talked about potential geothermal expansion up there, which you guys and we guys in the county submitted letters of concern to in your county about the EI or the BLM regarding the latest EIS on geothermal expansion in the area. There's been some off-record comments that the potential in the area, Deep Rose, I think it was called at one time, doesn't have the same potential as the current coastal area does. So it may not be closed or open cycle potential anyways, but perhaps binary or other activities might be worth pursuing, but they all take water. So that's all I have at the moment. Thank you.
If I might, with regards to Mr. Wertz, Renee, Chuck Krieger, and myself were invited by Scott O'Neill to hear his presentation, see his presentation, and he did put a lot of engineering work into it, there's no question about it, but I think it boiled down to a question about, is there really water available through water rights that could be had? I had a subsequent meeting with Mr. Wertz, and I believe we talked to our legal counsel here, and I think that is the issue, is there water available off the Kern River that's not already accounted for through existing water rights? I don't know if you want to expound on that.
There is a matter right now pending before the State Water Resources Control Board about whether or not there is unappropriated water on the Kern River, but that proceeding really relates to water that has gone into the intertie historically, which is really high flow waters. When that happens, sometimes that water will be put into the State Water Project California Aqueduct to avoid flooding up north. So there's a dispute about that, and also some about whether or not there was water forfeited by a certain water district. But I'm not aware of any unappropriated water up there where on the south or north fork of the Kern River. And I suspect that the Onyx Ranch is the closest thing that you're going to see to where somebody's trying to transfer a right from up there down to the valley floor. And I suspect that'll be challenged vigorously, I suspect.
And I would just offer as a counter that most of these ideas we've talked about today have similar challenges to them, so we might not want to discount this one.
I totally agree, but right now you might as well wait and let it play itself out on the Kern River, because it's happening right now, redefining the rights.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, I guess back to the recycled water, and I think a couple of thoughts I had on that was, one of the leaders in the nation is a couple hours away, Orange County Water District, and I think it might be worth exploring just, maybe educating this board on all the stuff they're doing. It's not all applicable, but, certainly, they've got the technology, they know what's going on. There is one kind of a dark area in this right now, and that's PFAS. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. It's Teflon. So basically, what is it called? Dark Waters. It stars the Hulk, Mark Ruffalo. But that's one of the stories on it, and it's a big issue right now in the country, in the world, because it is recalcitrant, it doesn't degrade in the environment. And they're finding it everywhere. And it's in wastewater. It can be found in wastewater. And Orange County has been recharging through infiltration. So it's basically the Santa Ana River, the base flow of that is 80 to 85% treated wastewater. It's tertiary treated, but it doesn't treat PFAS. So now they've been recharging this for a long time, and they've found they've got a 7-mile plume to deal with. And so people are really there. They've got a huge program to look at different pilot testing, but it's just, this is just analytical technology that's improving. I mean, we've got stuff in our water we don't know about, and we'll just learn as we go. There's 80,000 chemicals or something out there, and we test for 100 or 200. So this is what we call contaminants of emerging concern. And that's one of the issues that I think the state, the nation will be dealing with in the coming years, is how to better deal with these things. But still, we need to take advantage of all the recycled water we can, and I'm really pleased to hear the board, saying that's the low-hanging fruit. But maybe some kind of a work group or something needs to be formed to really figure out what's the Navy's thoughts on this, what's the cities, what's the district, what's the communities, to really get at these issues of like the to each of, how to maximize it, what are the things that ought to be used for, and really, figure that out before it's too late and things have been decided. Because it's a desert. Every drop's precious, and recycled water is a key. And then conservation, one thing I haven't heard is the going to AC. And I know Dawn and I have talked about that over the years, but getting rid of the evaporative coolers, they use a lot of water. That could be combined with an energy subsidy, and that could really help. So that's another piece that there's probably state or federal money that could be pursued to do that.
I'll make a quick comment there.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
No, not at all.
Yeah, that the Water District has been looking at the recommendation that we maybe help find a program that can subsidize through grants people who are willing to remove their swamp pools, install some kind of air conditioning. I want to make it clear, because it seems to be some people out there thinking it's something that the Water District wants to mandate. We don't want to mandate it. We want to give it as another option to everyone out there to say, hey, if we were able to find a grant and money's available to offset the capital cost of installing it, it'd be a program like Cash for Gas. We apply for it, we assist you. It's entirely up to the individual if they want to do it. I mean, sitting and mandating it, no, we have no authority to mandate it, no, I think we should. And a couple of comments too, with the institution of the fact that solar energy needs to be provided on all new buildings, is that correct, Chuck?
That is correct.
Up to, what, 3 kilowatts?
Right now it's 2.6.
But I understand that some contractors are going to say, hey, now's the time to make it this big because it's going to be cheaper when you install it than redo it. Based on that, the one thing I would suggest is that, and I think the county ought to look at, that when that begins to happen, they do mandate refrigerated air. So that, and as I believe that Chuck Rulon told me, that it's been 5 or 6 years since anybody's put a swamp pool on a new home anyway.
Yeah, most people are all using AC units now.
So I just want to make it clear that it isn't that the Water District is looking to mandate everybody take off their slump coolers. We just want to be able to find a way, is there a way that we can to encourage that and somehow assist?
Yeah, I think that's the right place, and the general plans may be another place where that could be brought in, both the city and county, make that some sort of a requirement down the road, because it just, they're so energy efficient these days. The other thing I wanted to follow up on the El Paso area was the, that we've learned a lot with the SkyTem data, and we're learning more even now thanks to the seismic data that was provided to the brackish group. Yeah, which was a big deal to get from the Navy. And I think that there's some additional work that could be done to help better characterize the basin by bringing that seismic data in a little more detail. And, and we're going to talk about this later today, but we just did some additional analysis in the North Brown Road area and are tying together some of the surface geology with the borehole, both lithology and geophysics, looking at the environmental depositional environment and tying that back into the seismic data. And I see some things there that are very interesting. One of the things we see in the seismic data, SkyTem data that we've pointed out before is we can see some channels running across the basin from the northwest corner towards the southeast. And those are important to understand the geology and how water is coming into the basin, as well as what the potential is deeper in the out basin. And those also can be used up in the El Paso area. There's only one line that we have our hands on from the Navy. Actually, I guess there's a couple, but that go up into that area. But some of the things that the folks that did that work identified was what they thought was the bottom of the Pleistocene, the marker for the bottom of the Pleistocene, top of the Pliocene, which is when you really get out of those fine-grained sediments and the more coarse-grained sediments. And then also the top of the Goler and Ricardo Formation, which is where you get into tighter geology. And so if we can identify, if we can bring those in a little more clearly, we can do a better estimate of what the production capability and water resources are in the overall basin, which leads to the storage estimate. So that's another piece of the pie, or the piece of the puzzle here, in terms of how much production we actually have capability in this. So I think the El Paso area really does deserve some additional work. That one well will get us a little bit, but I think the seismic data, there's also some additional seismic data out there, but I'm not sure how good a quality it is. But I think it's something we could look into.
Let me ask you quick about the El Paso area. Is that a recharge area? In other words, are we looking at water, let's say, I always sort of looked at it as a plateau. So you have this one area of water that's getting recharged, which spills into our valley, and that's the area where you see the wells coming up and down depending on, but it's basically recharged for our valley, even though it may get so high that some of it might spill off into the Fremont area. Is that literally that area recharged for our valley? Would we just be capturing water that's coming to our valley anyway? I guess I'm asking.
Well, I think we have the wells out there to do some additional testing. What you're talking about is the flux coming from that area into the basin. And what you see there when you look at both the seismic data and the SkyTem data is there's not just one fault, but 2 or 3 faults that run kind of north-south across that area. So it's complicated. There's not going to, I don't think there'll ever be a real good answer for that. But you can definitely see there's an area there that would be a very viable banking area, which Chuck looked at a number of years ago and did a report on. What we don't have is enough details on how productive that can be, how much we can put in it, and how quick we can take it out. So those are the kind of things that we look at. But so I think that's another area that has potential. And there's not much in the way of wells out in the El Paso area except near those faults. So a better understanding of that area would be helpful.
So we don't know if it's new water or water that's coming here anyway. In other words, if we were to tap water from there, is it still affecting our aquifer like any other well might be? Or is it new water?
Well, but, I don't think you'd want to call it new water, but again, back to the groundwater levels, you want to try to stabilize those. And if you spread your pumping out, you can hopefully do that a little better. So that could be helpful. There's a big cost with piping though, So that would be one of the things. But again, if it becomes a combination of a supply and a recharge project, and you have other partners in it, then maybe it's possible.
I believe the El Paso area is actually 200 or 300 feet higher than the valley, so it's hard for me to believe that the water's going to flow uphill, and it's not going to, taking water out of the El Paso area is not going to allow water from hundreds of feet below flow back up into the El Paso.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that water coming in the El Paso areas basically comes downhill into our basin.
To some extent.
I'm not saying the other way
I
around.
assume it does, but there's
Yeah.
a fault, so it's hard. I'm not sure the modeling is that accurate at this point in time. But we do know that there are several wells up there that are going up, and I don't believe that the model has any recharge at all coming off the Sierras into that area. So it's hard for me to believe that when you look at the measured data, that there isn't still some modeling effort that needs to go on as to, it may be very minimal recharge, and of course that's the issue. If you don't want to put an expensive well in a big channel in to pump it somewhere, if the total capacity out of the thing is only 100 or 200 acre feet a year. But that's what we don't know. But the water's not going to run uphill. I guarantee that.
Well, I think I know.
We're going to call for a short break here, 10, 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Everybody?
Do you have a time limit on this meeting?
No.
Yeah,
6 o'clock tonight.
It depends on where it goes.
That's probably made at least another hour.
Depends how long it stays.
You guys are a puzzle right now.
Oh, well, it's Jim.
Tim is now, yes.
I'm a consultant.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and call back into order here at 11:08. And who wanted to start off this segment? Ron, you were having some stuff to say on all that.
Well, I really want to make sure that before we leave here again, we have some kind of either goal or direction between staff and the engineering consultant and such, and how we're going to proceed. The worst thing to do is walk out of here and say, oh, we had a great discussion. I want to make sure we walk out of here that we assign in such a way, whether it be Chuck to refine this and work it up with the new costs and what the hurdles may be, maybe working with Tim and take all these ideas and somehow don't let them drop. And I also feel that anything that we do, we need to work in conjunction with the GA. They should be informed of what we're doing and what's going on, and watch us closely, and how do we interact with all these. Because I think what we're doing is we're taking a step forward beyond the identified projects at this point. And I think that's important. That's why I wanted to do this whole thing. I thought it was important. So that's what I'm looking for before we go out of here. What do we do? So I'll be looking recommendations, I guess, from the staff and the consultants on where we move to.
Well, to your point, Chuck, Jim, Tim, and I were speaking during the break, and that's pretty much exactly what we were discussing doing, is taking what you have in front of you. That was from the 2012 workshop and what Chuck presented, and updating it. And also including some things some ideas that were brought forth today. So I think we're willing to do that if that's the board's desire.
I think, my opinion would be remiss not to. And as you're doing it, is it something that maybe you want to bring by the Water Management Committee so we can look at it as it progresses and such? And because I have notes of what we should, we don't want to miss anything we talked about. I'm sure you have all the notes. It would be nice that as it progresses, we sort of make that one of our topics and keep it moving. And then where it goes from there, we're just going to have to see. But I think what we do now is we get people talking about it and understanding those other options.
The two things I like to have, or see have done, is pursue the city as far as the plant goes over there. And I didn't think that Judy had a bad idea as far as doing the sewer plant ourselves. We'd have control over our own destiny as far as that goes. It's going to be expensive anyway, no matter how you look at it. And also getting Trona cereals sustainable on their own, like Larry brought up earlier. And I think it's fairly easy to do. It's going to cost money naturally, but they have the water over there that they can do their own thing, inject it back into the lake or whatever they have to do. That would save them from even negotiating with the city, because they're naturally the other ones that want the water in the valley here. So if we can eliminate two problems there with cereals, that's 2 out of the 3 that I'd like to see. And then pursue the city as far as the sewer plant goes. That's my opinion. Dan?
Now, I totally concur with both Ron and you. We need to work with the GA. We need to work with the city, figure out how to do that, and we need to work with Searles. I think those are the 3 entities, and I think the city, as opposed to the GA, for GA issues, we don't need to work with the GA for the wastewater treatment plant issues. That can be between the water district and the city. And we need to pursue that. And not that I think they're going to actually come to resolution with the Navy in the next year or 2. So I don't think there's any harm that they're going to do anything immediately, because they haven't done anything for 8 years. We need to be proactive, and we need to push it.
And those items are within our arm's reach. We don't have to go, 100, 200 miles away from here to get that water.
Right.
So,
Brandon, thank you.
I think, Chuck, you highlighted exactly the main points in my mind.
Microphone, please.
Chuck highlighted the main points in my mind, and especially I would like to see the district wastewater facility, and if it needs to be modernized / rebuilt, then that's what we do. But then we, if you will, control the water from start to finish. You got the full cycle. So that would definitely be a big agenda item for myself.
Another thing, along with the lines of the sewer plant over there, we would have the city reimburse us for the sewer fees that are being charged to contractors now, which would be an income for us to develop that sewer plant.
Like I said, anything was open for discussion. I still think the idea that Chucky came up with that we own a tertiary recovery system, we purchase the off-stream is a possibility as well.
Yes.
They still operate, we basically, I don't know if we would purchase or they would be paying us to handle the off-stream. I'm not sure how that would work, but it'd be nice if they're paying us to handle the off-stream, and that's a possibility. So those are the things I would hope that you guys begin to look at.
Judy?
Yes. There's one thing you haven't mentioned. David Sainterman is not here, but he is the only close connection that this board has with the Navy, excuse me, with the Navy. And I think something you need to cultivate, explore and cultivate is a closer relationship with that portion of the Navy that deals with groundwater. And I realize it's going to be very difficult because of the way the base is now fragmented as opposed to how it was, say, 30 years ago when it was a Naval Weapons Center. We had many commands over there, but it's something I believe you need to explore and try to go forward with. I know it's going to be difficult. And thank you. Thank you for having this workshop and talking about this. I believe it is something that has been needed for a long time to get all of the board members kind of on the same page.
Let me see if you have anything else, Tim, to talk about?
No, I think, the recycled water is the low-hanging fruit, and really looking at what the obstacles are to that, and what are the partners, what is the community willing to buy in and want. And then conservation, continuing that, because you can always do more. I mean, there's been a lot done here, though. And recognizing the connection between conservation and the recycled water volume is the other thing. And then I think there's just still more that we can get out of the existing data regarding what we know about the basin. And we're just beginning to tap into that with the brackish water processing and, and this question of what's the actual storage in the basin. Then these ideas of the infiltration galleries I meant to mention earlier, one thing that hasn't, it isn't an element here, and I understand why it hasn't been, is stormwater capture, because there's very little storms coming through, but that might be another way to look at that. When you do get the few storms you do have coming through here, where are the key places that you might be able to, at least gauge the volume and maybe capture something, maybe optimize that a little bit. I know it was looked at a long time ago by the city, and they had some kind of a plan, but that might be another thing just to keep an eye on.
Keep it.
Yeah.
Did you look at that a little bit?
I think they did. It was sort of economically not feasible. You bring up a good point. Maybe rather than looking at a citywide recapture, it may be identify areas that where everything seems to go anyway, because naturally, and that's our capture area. That could be, I'm by far not a psychologist to figure that out, but that might be a more economical way. That there's certain areas that you captured in, rather than try to put a whole system in the city where everything is captured.
Right.
Yeah.
The city actually had a stormwater, flow model put together about 20 years ago, and it was funded, it wasn't funded, it was thought to be, I think it was like $75 or $80 million, and there was no chance of doing anything. But there are, some given pathways where the flow does go, like down Bowman Road, that you could, even if you only captured 100 or 200 acre feet a year, if you're tertiary plant was close enough to where there was a volume of water rather than letting the water just evaporate. Every little bit is gonna help when we come down to put it down to.
Larry?
President Chuck,
Thanks for walking up.
you might check with the RCD. I think they did a complete program on that.
It was before my time, so
Yeah.
I did.
You might check on that.
Okay.
I think they got a grant and did a study.
Study on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, where was I going with this? Just the other thing is, okay, that's right, the model, the groundwater flow model. Now, that was identified in the plan and through TAC discussions and through our brackish water study that, and models are never right. You know, that's a common term. You know, there's simulators. This one served the purpose really of looking at the water budget and using that for a water budget tool. But it's not adequate for some of the things moving forward. So I think the other thing that the water districts should probably be thinking about is what does the water districts want to get out of that model? Because you're going to be part of it. And what are the things that, what are the data that's needed to improve it that we don't already have? And I've mentioned some of those things, but I think that's important, and that's going to be important moving forward with any projects in this area. And the scale of that, the resolution needs to be improved in some areas where projects would go in. It needs to be a lot higher resolution in those particular areas. So then what you do basically, it's pretty simple. You basically increase the resolution in those areas. You still have the larger scale model, but it would still need to be improved. So thinking about that and getting ready for that is, I think, another piece that the district should be thinking about.
Sir?
Thanks, Mallory Boyd again. I want to first apologize to the guy over there I referred to as George earlier. Sorry, Larry.
That's okay.
It's Larry George.
It works.
As an item for potential follow-on activity, as you started the discussion, Ron, I think Tim had a great idea earlier about putting together a small group to look at tertiary treatment issues, not just the technology and the issues of PFAS, which are very real issues, but the public opinion and starting to educate our public. There's different communities locally. We've got the Orange County example that Tim brought up, and you've got the Las Vegas example, which they've got Lake Mead to mix all of their recovered water in back and forth. So we're surrounded by people that are doing tertiary treatment, but I think the public still has a lot of misconceptions about it that we perhaps could help them with by helping educate them through perhaps periodicals in the newspaper or a working group to put that strategy together. I think is a good idea. And I would volunteer the county representative to help or be part of that.
I think that whatever form this project takes, I would hope they would take those kind of things into account. There may be certain suggestions or recommendations there. It might require a working group like that to come to the final conclusions. I would hope what we see come out of this is maybe by priority, here's, I would hope that at some point this board will say, we want to do this, and now move ahead with it. That's where I want to see something happen, whether it be a priority list, the board decides, or whatever. But I agree with you that I don't know what form this project may take, but there may be a small committee meeting or something to say, that includes Tim and maybe some people from some other areas, and that Chuck may want to put together to get all the information, or he may have it all right here.
I would certainly agree. We want to come out of this meeting with something more than just say we're going to have another meeting.
Right.
We need to. We've been doing that for 30 years, 40 years. And we need to actually try to make some progress in some of these areas. So the more we can do to have more meetings and actually get some actual action done, the better off we're going to be.
Why don't you devise something then, Stan, if you want to get a small group together, including Chuck, and start working on it.
Well, I think that Don has already said that we're going to work
I think it should come out of
on staff.
Let's let Don work with Chuck.
Okay.
and come up with some options.
And we're in for
And
Jim
then we
Mayo.
then we can discuss those options at a board meeting.
You said you were in a hurry, so
Well,
that's what we're trying to do.
yeah, no, and I appreciate that. We do need to get something done.
Let's add it to the agenda, this particular item, whatever you want to title it, at the water management meeting. And I think that any discussions that take place there, we would bring back to the board as a report. And then that would keep us on track. I don't know.
So are we looking at the April board meeting? Or?
What, for results?
No, to discuss something else.
Possibly we'll just see where it goes. I can't say what it's going to look like and then see the smile. There's a lot of work to be done.
We could have somebody summarize we could have our general manager summarize what he thought we were discussing today. And
I think that's what you're going to ask.
The priorities.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my take is, like I said, the four of us will get together, we'll update what's been done previously and with ideas that came today, and update costs, things like that, and then come back maybe to water management and prioritize them, because obviously we can't do all these things, but get a sense of priority and then go from there.
But make sure they also talk about political, legal, and environmental purpose.
Absolutely.
Right, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Hey, Ron.
That was all. Is this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Not very well, you might want to
and
use Jim's.
Even though today we saw kind of a boiled down version, I think I've shown you excerpts from the other working by those are very important concerns, because and just as important as money, certainly. So yeah, we'll have those in mind and present the challenges in the other categories besides economics.
You'll have it ready by April, like Chuck asked. I'm just kidding.
I mean, even if we get 2 bits on the puzzle.
Well, I
together
know what
in
you
April.
want. You want to see something from the next water management meeting, at least, if nothing else, a recap of what we've agreed to here, and continue reporting about what the progress is.
I'd like to hear something on it in progress.
Sounds good.
Jim, you have anything?
I think the direction's clear, what the board's looking for, and I think we know. So,
Don?
nothing to do.
Anybody else? Okay, are we going to adjourn to?
No.
Okay. Then I'll make a motion that we adjourn this meeting and appreciate everybody's attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. First time he's ever done that.
Don showed me how to do it, I just forgot how to do it.
I'm just used to it.